Thank you, and thank you for everyone listening, coming to you from our headquarters in New York. I'm going to move quickly through the presentation because there's a lot of content here. Todos Medical was founded with the idea that we could measure the immune system and identify disease early. And if you can identify disease early, then there's an ability to intervene. And the earlier you intervene, obviously, you have better outcomes and usually lower costs. So that has been the objective of Todos. And with that time, we do this in the area of cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and now COVID. The safe harbors here. So in terms of the verticals in which we are a revenue producing company. So we did 5 million in 2020 through the end of the third quarter of 2021. We did 7.7 million, and we had a significant fourth quarter. And so we're excited to share those results when we file our 10K in the weeks ahead. And now we are looking to significantly grow that revenue. That revenue is primarily driven by COVID and COVID testing. So we started out offering COVID testing services and supplies to third-party labs. We moved over time, once we completed the acquisition of our own lab, into the service offering of actually performing COVID testing ourselves. And that's what we're building out and looking to build out the capacity we have in that lab. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then over time, what we're doing is we're building out beyond COVID to do other types of tests, menus that our target customers are interested in. And all of this work in the commercial side is to prepare for the commercial launch of our proprietary breast cancer test, Videssa, which will be in the market about a year from now. And I'll talk about that in a moment as well. So that leads us to Videssa and the other IP-based that we have tests. That's really the second leg in the stool. And those two things together, the revenue that we're making from COVID now, and then bringing on laboratory developed tests that are proprietary to us to further drive revenue and attract business around those verticals in cancer and Alzheimer's. That's the business of Todos. We recently formed we formed a joint venture a couple of years ago, but we really solidified it by acquiring all of the IP so that it's a direct ownership interest by Todos in the entity that owns the intellectual property, and that's called 3CL Pharma. 3CL Pharma is developing products based on the 3CL protease, which is critical in COVID-19. And so we will talk about that in more detail. That is a majority-owned subsidiary of Todos at this point, as of yesterday when we announced the acquisition. And the intention is for that to ultimately be spun off and create value separately for Todos. However, in the event that the market cap makes sense of Todos, we could complete the acquisition of the unowned portion and consolidate. So we're going to see how the market reacts and what the opportunities are for 3CL Pharma over time. But for the current time, we're just focused on execution. So a little bit about COVID. Obviously, there's a relatively high vaccination rate in most of the world at this point, except for third world countries. Obviously the question of fully vaccinated and people losing immunity, waning immunity, is contributing to reinfections or initial infections among the vaccinated. And there are a couple of other things going on here. New variants are coming up. Obviously, Omicron 1, BA1 is counted for the vast majority of cases. A subvariant called BA2 is now, I believe, the majority of cases in the UK and is about 27% here in the US. And once you get above 50% with a new variant, that's usually when you start to see a spike in cases. And so we are seeing that in Europe, and we're expecting that to come here into the US in the months ahead. But there are potentially other variants which could, further the pandemic and create issues with regards to immunity or lack thereof. We know that in the US, there are over 16 million people over the age of 80. Over the age of 65, that's obviously a much, much bigger number, much more than double. So you're talking about a big population of people who are immune compromised regardless of vaccination status, just by age, and people who are under 65 and who are immune compromised by diagnosis and who have compromised immune systems, who take steroids. Those suppress the effectiveness of vaccine, and so those are also a target for antivirals. We know the government has made significant investment in antivirals here in the U.S., as well as significant advancements abroad, and so we believe that this is going to continue in terms of spend. Now, let's talk initially about our revenue-producing assets. As I mentioned, we had quite significant revenue growth over the last couple of years. We went from a pre-revenue company, pre-COVID, and we've got quite significant revenue, well over 8 figures at this point. So we're in, we're over 10 million. So we're excited about that for the full year. We see a significant growth trend continuing because we've invested heavily in capacity for COVID testing, and so we can take larger institutional accounts. We're right now at about 25,000 tests per day. Once we complete the validation of the Lumira DX test that we're finalizing now, that should double to 50,000. So that's quite exciting, and we get good margins on those tests. And so the objective now is to move from places where we had 40 to 50% margin in the distribution business. We want to move to the much higher margin, 70 to 80% margin in the testing business, and that's the focus. Just a little bit about the lab. It's highly automated. We've invested several $1 million to bring in the top automation and top experts to be able to drive volume and ability to deliver in the lab. And now we're building out the commercialization staff to be able to get large accounts. We're very excited about that. We did just hire a chief commercial officer. We'll be making that announcement in the near future. And the idea now is we're going to be continuing to build this out and expanding our test menu beyond COVID so that we can get more dollars per patient with our clients that we're seeing. Really, having Provista, in our pocket has allowed us to do a lot of validations to be able to sell those same reagent supplies that we use at Provista to other labs. And so that is, that's where this business had originally started. We did work with Provista to validate everything, then we sold that to other labs. Obviously, over time, we realized that we'd much rather be the lab than supplying the lab. And now that we're building out the lab business, it remains important for us to have this distribution arm. 1, so we can see what's going on in the market. 2, because we make money from it, from existing clients. 3, we think we can grow this business, and we're looking at strategic ways to do that, where our management time and our capital will not be the drivers of that, but we'll be able to have some people come in, maybe some new management, and drive this subsidiary Corona Diagnostics forward. The one thing to note there is we think that there will be a big increase in neutralizing antibody testing, and that's largely driven by the fact that there's a lot of waning immunity and people don't know whether or not to get a booster. And so that's going to become a bigger and bigger question, especially as cases begin to take off again now that we're in the trough, Omicron trough. So a little bit about our proprietary testing pipeline. So the base obviously has been COVID testing. We've added neutralizing antibody testing and other immune monitoring testing around COVID-19 so that people can evaluate where they are and make some decisions, whether it relates to booster or risk, mask, et cetera, that are comfortable with their risk profile. But all of that is, and we're bringing on UTI, STD, CGX, PGX, cancer genetics, pharmacogenomics, so we can offer a larger offering and get a different and more mature customer base. But all of this is setting the stage for Videssa, and we're preparing for Videssa. So Videssa is our breast cancer blood test. It's commercial stage now. We have also the Limpro test, which is for Alzheimer's disease, where we'll be getting confirmatory data to confirm an interim result that we got in 2019. We expect to get this confirmatory data in the first half of this year. We also have Todos test, which I'll talk about, which is a new way of looking at COVID-19 based upon the 3CL protease. And lastly, we have our platform, our TBIA platform, where we have TMB1, TMB2, which are breast cancer tests that have CE mark, as well as TMC1 that has a CE mark for the detection of colon cancer. So we have a robust pipeline, but the focus is really Videssa because that is a commercial stage ready now, and it will be launched within the next 12 months or relaunched. And I'll tell that story here in a moment. So in terms of breast cancer, we have a significant challenge with regards to breast cancer for the 40% of women who have dense breast. Dense breast effectively means that you take an image of the breast and you can't get a proper evaluation of all the structures because it's too dense. And so you can't distinguish a mass that could be cancer from something that is just an artifact. This is such a significant problem that there's actually a $7 billion post-mammogram market for which there is no good current standard of care for these women. And the issue of using the mammogram continually in women who have dense breasts who are going to get no benefit from it because they can't get a proper result was so problematic that actually 32 states have passed legislation requiring providers to inform patients about their breast density so they don't continually move to biopsy which is the biggest problem. They go and they get biopsies over and over. The biopsies are always negative, but it creates a lot of angst, uncertainty, and cost. $6,000 by the time it's all said and done, from a inconclusive mammogram to a completed biopsy is $6,000 to the system. So our strategy of the studies that we've done to date is to complete, basically, after you get the mammogram, you take a blood test. If you're inconclusive and you take a blood test and the blood test shows that you're negative, there's a 98.4% negative predictive value that is accurate. And you can obviously take this blood test a lot more often than you can get a biopsy or get a mammogram. Conversely, there's also very, very strong sensitivity for this test, over 92% in non-dense and over 94% in dense breast. And so this can be used to actually identify the presence of breast cancer, not just breast cancer risk. Within the population of dense breast, we believe that we can reduce biopsies significantly by upwards of 45%. So that's a very, very significant reduction in biopsies by using the Videssa. And all of this data that we're presenting was done over 3 prospectively gathered trials. It was over 1,000 patients. And this test was actually launched. $50 million went into the development and commercialization and launch of the test. The launch was successful in that they got people to use the test. It was unsuccessful in the sense that they didn't have a unique CPT code and they were relying on code stacking strategies. With the new Obamacare, that was not successful. And so a lot of that $50 million actually went to fund accounts receivable so the company could continue operations. The primary investors were Dreyfus Capital, backed out when they realized we're not going to get reimbursed for the tests. And so basically that company shut down and was sold to a hedge fund, and we acquired it from that hedge fund. But the new data since all of that happened in 2018 really allows us to see the value of this test. And now we're preparing to engage with CMS regarding the best use case of the test and looking for limited reimbursement. So the targets for commercialization of this breast cancer test are: 1, women under 43 who are not eligible for mammogram; 2, obviously dense breast, which I talked about here; and 3, women who have a history of breast cancer who want to make sure that they're not going to have recurrence, and so they want to test themselves a little more often. So I'll skip through most of the other types of testing that we have, although they're very interesting, and just move right to 3CL Pharma, which is a lot of the excitement around the company through the COVID period. We formed a joint venture with a company called NLC Pharma in 2020 around the TOLO test. The TOLO test is basically an assay that allows us to look at the presence of the 3CL protease as a proxy for coronavirus. The 3CL protease, now also called the main protease by the scientific literature. So MPRO and 3CL Pro are the same thing. It's the protease that basically allows the virus to chop itself into pieces and to be able to go and become active proteins, leave the cell, and infect other cells. So it's a virally encoded enzyme. It's required for the virus replication and transmission. It's conserved across all nidovirus coronaviruses. So that includes SARS-1, MERS, SARS-2, and 229E, which is a common cold virus. So it's not exclusive to COVID-19. And clearly it's shown this is the same mechanism of action as Pfizer's Paxlovid compound. If you take it early, given Pfizer's data, we see very clearly you can dramatically reduce replication, reduce viral loads, and improve outcomes for patients. And so we are developing products based on this as well. The other thing that the 3CL protease does, it also turns off the host immune response. So the protease is really the thing that the virus creates the most of initially to go out and turn off the host immune response, so that when more of the virus is replicated, it's able to spread without being identified by the immune system. Of course, once the immune system eventually finds it, there's a hyperreaction. That's what can lead to the cytokine storm. And then at that point, an inhibitor of the 3CL protease in and of itself isn't enough. You also have to dampen the cytokine storm to stop the trigger. And that's what we're doing with some of our products. A little bit about the inhibition of the 3CL protease. We know ivermectin is a 3CL protease inhibitor, although it's very weak. We have 3 products: Tolavid Daily, which is 2.5 times stronger than ivermectin; Tolavid, which is 25 times stronger than ivermectin. Both of these, Tolavid and Tolavid Daily, are supplements. And then we have Tolavir, which is our botanical drug candidate. It's over 50 times stronger than ivermectin in terms of 3CL protease inhibition. So when people say, "Oh, ivermectin, could potentially work," yes, I'm sure for some people taking it very early in the disease, there's been benefit. We don't think it's going to have a significant benefit for most people, and there's toxicity. So you have to take so much of it, it becomes too toxic, given how the low binding affinity. So we think our products, and so far we've seen our products are much better. Again, Tolavid and Tolavid Daily are dietary supplements, so not approved to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any disease. However, people have been using them, and you go online on Amazon today, you can see very strong reviews by people who've used them. We took the Tolavid Daily supplement off the market for the current time. We're evaluating certain things, additional uses, and making sure that there's no issues with respect to its ability to inhibit the protease. Given the new virulence of BA1 and BA2, we don't have that concern with Tolavid. We're very, very confident that Tolavid can inhibit the 3-cell proteases associated with BA1 and BA2 based on all of our studies. So this is on the market today. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it at mytolavid.com. You can also buy it in bulk on Alibaba. We sell it at $299 a bottle. We've obviously got good margins here. We've reached peak sales of over $80,000 in a single day. To date, we've done over $1 million in revenue, and we're just now beginning to market it. So we're feeling very comfortable here. Now let's go to Tolovir, which is our botanical drug candidate with very strong antiviral and anti-cytokine activity. Why is that? Well, because we have this very strong 3-cell protease inhibitor, which I showed previously, the IC50 binding affinity. And then on top of that, we have a specific compound that targets the cytokine storm. And it targets it not only in COVID, it's used for cancer, it's used for a number of other things. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's actually approved for HIV to help the cytokine storm reduce as well. So the combination of these two products together, these two compounds, together within the Tolovir product are what we have been taking to market. And so looking at the stage of development, we're the only oral antiviral in the hospital setting that has had any success as far as we've seen anywhere in the world. We're praying for an IND filing in the US and the EU, and we are looking to file EUAs based on the data I'm going to show you for certain places, including Greece and other areas. We are also looking at other areas for the products, not just Tolavid, but Tolovir as well, moderate to severe, so pre-hospital. Because this is a botanical, unlike some of these others, and there's a long safety history with the ingredients associated with our botanical, we have the ability to go into pediatrics. And then in addition to that, we are looking at long COVID, as we've been approached by several patient advocacy groups whose members have used Tolavid and had some success. And so we're evaluating what that means. So really it's about killing the virus early. So beforehand, if you're taking it prophylactically, just on a supplement basis, if you get COVID, take it as early as possible, just like Pfizer and Merck. They want you to take it within 5 days because that's where you're going to have more success. If you get later stage, we obviously know there's issues dealing with later stage COVID. We saw some success with remdesivir. We think we can have that same success with Tolovir. And then obviously in the hospital phase, we have data to demonstrate. So we see ourselves competing with the Tolovir primarily with the remdesivir because we start in the hospital market, and then we'll move earlier from there. So when you look at the other oral antivirals, molnupiravir and Paxlovid, we would compare mostly with Paxlovid because we have the exact same mechanism of action. And of note, the company within Pfizer, Algeron, that's really been focused on the 3-cell protease, they were close competitors with our founder of the 3-cell protease subsidiary, Dorita Rod. So they're both pioneers in the space. So we had an original 2020 study with actually the dietary supplement version where we showed strong results, a 4-day reduction of time in the hospital. We showed obviously no deaths compared to 5 deaths in the control group, deteriorated to respirator 0 in the Tolavid group versus 3 in the control group, and better biomarker outcomes here and the CRP reduction. So that was with the dietary supplement. After those results, we worked on the formulation and combined this NXT1 and NLC1 and NLC2 extracts. And this is where we got much, much better results in the hospital. So we had a 7-day reduction from that same 17 that you saw in the previous study down to 10 with Tolovir as compared with the standard of care, which included remdesivir and dexamethasone. So placebo was standard of care. The treated group was Tolovir plus standard of care. We also saw a significant reduction in death. So on drug, while the patients were taking drug, there were 0 deaths in the Tolovir group. The patients all got, you see here, this 11 time to clinical improvement. They all got to clinical improvement by News 2 after we stopped treating one of the patients who actually had a stroke before enrolling in the trial, further deteriorated and passed away. but it wasn't while the patient was on drug, which was the key endpoint in the study. So all cause, there was 1 in the treatment group versus, so 1 out of 11 versus 3 out of 9 in the placebo group. There was obviously a reduction of people intubated. You see there was a reduction in need for supplemental oxygen. And if you did need supplemental oxygen, there was a roughly 40% reduction in the amount of supplemental oxygen, the number of days you needed it for. And we had improvement across all the biomarkers, D-dimers, C-reactive protein, and IL-6. So we achieved all the endpoints, the primary endpoints, the secondary endpoints, and the biomarker endpoints. And this was all done at Shahid Zadek Medical Center under Dr. Roca in Jerusalem, who's a tremendous collaborator. Very appreciative of working with him. We will be working with them going forward. We're preparing now for the phase 2/3 study, as well as submitting to different regulatory agencies based upon this. We also have this TOLA test, as I mentioned. The upside here of the TOLA test is that if you add it to antigen, it potentially has sensitivity comparable to PCR, for which we have data. And what this really also tells you if you're still infective. So if you're testing positive by PCR, but you're several days out and you don't feel sick, we can tell you whether or not that virus is still replicating, which is a big benefit. So this is not on the market yet. We've done it in lab, but it's something we're going to be doing next. So a little bit about the team. The key people to focus on are Dr. Jorge Leon, who's leading the Videsa charge. He's an early executive at Quest. He's brought several breast cancer tests to market, and he's really leading the charge with our test. Dr. Paula Trapaz, who's a former senior executive at Eli Lilly. She brought the only Alzheimer's test to market, Amyvid, and she's leading the charge with our Alzheimer's test. And Dr. Dorita Rod, who's the 3-cell sciences guru I mentioned, and she's going to be leading the charge in terms of COVID-19. So with that, we've got an expanding revenue base. We are current COVID testing, and we're bringing on new proprietary tests in the years ahead, starting with Videsa next year. We're expanding our dietary supplement brands and new offerings of dietary supplements, potentially combos, as well as antivirals. We are executing strategic partnerships. We already have a partnership in several jurisdictions in Europe, as well as other partnerships that we'll be signing, we think, in the near future. And we've got clear reg paths for approval. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to listen and open the floor to questions.
Many thanks, Gerald. You could see that you were overrunning, but I thought he's almost there. If you wouldn't mind going back 2 slides, because one of the questions that has just come into the virtual room is about the board and the management setup. Yep, that one's perfect. So we can peruse that whilst you answer some questions. Now, you graduated from Stanford as an engineer in 2006, and then you responded to a request from your dad, which guided your pathway to biotech. So I'm just wondering, is this a family business, or is it one that's based on family values?
Well, family values are always nice. Todos is not a family business. So, my father's not involved with this one. This is an Israeli-founded company. And really, we've got very close relationships with people in Israel. And really, the way we look at this is, we're now really on the cutting edge of pioneering immune-related diagnostics and therapeutics. And so the idea that you can identify people early and intervene and have success with products that are a lot less toxic than what you see out there in pharma is really the direction we want to go. Obviously, that has to start with accurate diagnostics. And luckily, with COVID, that was, the world responded very rapidly with that. And so that really created the pathway for our Tolavid products and our Tolavir products to come to market. But the next set of things, breast cancer, unfortunately, there aren't that many great tests for breast cancer, even though there are a lot of therapeutics. So we think we can add a lot of value, although the drug companies, the problem with therapeutics is that diagnostics really segment the market. So instead of waiting, if you have a 50% response rate, that means you have a 50% of non-response. And pharma companies love to sell to 100% of the market, even if half of it works. And so what we're trying to do is really break that up. And to that extent, yes, personalized medicine we do think is a family value. And we think it's something that everyone should be focused on, because you want to have the things that work for you, and you don't want to have things that don't work for you. It can be toxic. And that's really what the objective is.
And a peer of mine who interviewed you recently discussed and described Tolavid as botanical. Now, I went on to the Tolavid website, and I'm just wondering what the take-up is like. You've already discussed it briefly, but the margins must be high in this project, on this product, because there was $100 discount code there, which is a third off, essentially. So I'm assuming that either this is a loss leader or that the margins are incredibly high if you're offering $100 off.
Yeah, no, the margins are great. And the key for us, of course, is, it's a supplement, so people have to pay out of pocket. And we're turning around and taking all those profits and in reinvesting them, not only in the Tolavid product, but also in the other things we're doing, breast cancer research, Alzheimer's research. So yes, the margins are great, but the value, right? I think that's the question that in everywhere, the cost of making the product versus the value. There's over $20 million invested to get to the point where we are today with these products. Obviously, that investment needs to be recouped. And we do see, as compared to the other 3CL protease products that are out there in the market, ours is actually at a 40% discount to what you find with Paxlovid. So, we're not saying we have the indication of Paxlovid, but in terms of what the products do, they do the same thing. And so, the difference, of course, is that Paxlovid, you can't get it. You have to be an unvaccinated, immune-compromised person to find it in the United States. If you're vaccinated and you just don't feel well, you can't get it. With Tolavid, you can go online and get in your inbox tomorrow. And so there's a value to that is completely different. But as a small company, for us, we're not taking money on. We're reinvesting that so we can drive our innovation forward.
So I'm just wondering about this innovation, because obviously you're generating bucks with Tolavid. You said right at the beginning that your revenue is generated by COVID. So I'm wondering if you're looking to acquire or if you're going to make a COVID-related acquisition, particularly as you've got money in the pot.
Well, from our perspective, we just did with regards to the 3CL Sciences. We consolidated all the IP that we've been working on for the last couple of years. At the current time, to be honest with you, our lab is really, really well set up, and I don't think we need to acquire. I think we need to execute. Obviously, we are in the space looking at from an innovation perspective, not in the kind of PCR testing, but other things beyond 3CL products. We have our eyes on a few things, but we're not going to do anything now. We're going to stay laser focused, execute here. And as we deliver here, then we can add things after. But we think we have enough of a portfolio, enough on our plate that, we should just hunker down and execute with what we have.
Sure. So no secondary COVID-related acquisition on the immediate timeline. But one of the first questions that came in was from David, who said, how many COVID tests did Provista perform in February? So, if you said already that you can do 25,000 tests per day, but did you do 725,000 tests in February?
No, we didn't. COVID testing came down a lot. We did quite a lot in end of November and December and early January, and then COVID numbers came down quite a bit. So the revenue came down. I don't have the exact figure for February, although I can find that, and we can talk about that in some of our next releases coming up. So I appreciate the question. But there's no doubt the numbers came down a bit. But what we have done in response is we're actually consolidating. So the numbers came down for everybody. And they came down to such a level that many people can't make money doing it because they're very manual in their process. We're highly, highly automated, and we have supplier pricing. So we sell to labs that do COVID testing. Obviously, when we sell to labs that do COVID testing, we have a margin built in. And so when we do our own COVID testing, that margin disappears. And so, for us, we have automation, which reduces our personnel costs, and we have distributor pricing. So we can get our price down ultimately to a point where we can be extremely competitive and consolidate. And that's our strategy, because we think there's going to end up being pricing pressure on COVID testing in general. And it's going to be a volume game because there's going to have to be a lot more just tests out there in the market so people can make sure that whoever they're congregating with is quote unquote safe. So that's our strategy and our plan. And it's been actually working out pretty well over the last several weeks. We've been able to bring in several accounts that, the volume went from 500 a day. It's now down to, 25 to 50 a day, but their operation is still running and they're getting ready for the next surge that we see around the corner. And so really COVID testing is boom and bust. You have to be ready for the booms and you have to be able to survive the busts. A lot of people can't deal with the booms because they don't have the capacity. And when the busts, the costs are too high. And so at both ends of those cycles, we can take market share. And so that's our strategy.
Okay, in terms of the strategy, we have run out of time, but one more question. Are you going to consider a NASDAQ, a main listing, USA listing, or come to the UK and do main board or AIM in London?
Right now, we have already an application in with NASDAQ. So, the plan is to do NASDAQ. The question of the timing, obviously, because of where the stock price is and, all of that. So that's really the key for us. We're kind of in a position because we are making money where we're not, desperate that we need cash tomorrow to be able to do stuff. We have to handle some stuff, but, we have enough revenue and receivables that we can manage. So the answer is yes, we plan to do one, but we plan to do it, at a time when we think that it's very, very clear and all of the headwinds from a marketplace perspective kind of subsided. Obviously, the war, no one expected that in Ukraine and Russia, and several other geopolitical things have been going on right now. So markets are a little choppy, but we do think that they'll normalize, and then at the right time we'll make our move.
Okay, I just want to tell you that we've had loads of questions from David, Dr. Janet Massey, Anthony. So if you don't mind, Gerald, I think you're going to have to do a follow-up interview with my colleague, Christine, when you can. But Gerald, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate it. I've lost my voice and I'm not doing any of the talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.